With the latest World Championship just coming to its conclusion, I thought I'd share a game from one of the most interesting World Championships of all time, that being Bobby Fischer versus Boris Spassky. This match was played in Reykjavik, Iceland in 1972. After Fischer won, he chose not to defend his title, becoming a complete recluse from society and doing no further chess for many years. This game in particular is Fischer's first win in the match after going down 0-2, where Fischer uses an unusual novelty in the opening and then goes on to completely dominate in the middle game. Spassky decided to open with d4, typical Russian style, going for a Nimzo Indian or probably a Queen's Gambit style setup. So Fischer just goes knight f6 as his bread and butter through most of his playing career. And we have c4 on the board, e6. Looks like we're heading towards a Nimzo Indian, but no, we see c5. This is known as the Benoni because of the anti-Nimzo Indian we see with the not playing knight c3, which is typical of that line. So we have d5 laid by Spassky trying to break open black structure. Fischer decides to capture, so now he has these doubled pawns. Spassky recaptures, giving himself a nice sort of thorn in black side here with his pawn on d5. And then we see d6 played by Fischer. This is it's almost his only option, and this bishop is going to have to go out on this long diagonal because, quite frankly, if you want to put it on e7, it doesn't see anything. He sees this knight, this pawn, it's completely useless. So we have knight c3 played by Spassky, anchoring in this pawn, and then Fischer just goes g6. So knight d2, Spassky wants to reroute this knight because he feels like it's not going to be very useful here. Obviously this pawn does control a lot of the key squares, and it's not very useful on g5. So knight bd7 from Fischer, and then we have e4. Spassky takes his claim in the center, thinks, Fischer, if you're not going to take the center, I sure as hell will. So we see bishop g7, and then both players decide to castle. And then we see Fischer almost ends up with a similar sort of Nimzo Indian-esque setup, which we usually love to play. Like, obviously pawn's not on d5. This is like the Gruenfeld, or no, King's Indian style position, sorry, that Fischer loved to play. And it was his bread and butter throughout his entire playing career. So we have rook e8 played by Fischer, and then queen c2 by Boris Spassky, just trying to get his queen off its starting square. Knight h5 by Fischer, and this is the weird novelty. This is sort of a very interesting move, because Spassky can just take, and of course he does. So bishop takes, and then g takes h5, and then what is this pawn doing? I mean, it looks very interesting. I think Spassky probably thought for a lot of time in this position. He had ideas here. So he had his quick play with the queen, and his piece is actually mobilized into this game rather quickly. So we see knight c4, trying to attack this weak d6 pawn, and then knight e5. Obviously that pawn is now defended by the queen. You can exchange knights, but he decides not to. We see knight e3. So this knight, obviously it's very nice when you have knights in the center. They control a lot of key squares. And then we see queen h4. Fischer immediately springs into the attack. Because of that, we see bishop d2, wants to sort of connect his rooks, make sure he's going to be able to defend this ensuing onslaught. And knight to g4. Now, threatening checkmate in one. Yes, that would be checkmate. So Spassky is forced to trade the knights. So we see takes. Now this pawn is just marching up the board now. This weird little pawn on h6 now is starting to become an attacker. It's becoming an asset in Fischer's position. Bishop f4 by Spassky again. He wants to pry out his weaknesses. You know, it's typical Russian style of play. You know, you attack what's concrete pawn structure. The pawns cannot move backwards. So we see queen f6 by Fischer. Goes back to defend that pawn. He thinks the attack is not going to rage on him. Maybe he wants to push h5, get his other pieces into the game first. So we see g3. Now Spassky stops the pawn, but he's given himself some light squared weaknesses. And with Fischer still having a light squared bishop, this could spell disaster for Black's position. So bishop d7. Fischer just slowly mobilizing his pieces. a4, b6, stopping the advancement. Rook fe1, and then we see a6, top engine move. And rook e2 played by Spassky. He wants to double up on one of the files that he can. Very principled play. b5, wants to break. Fischer just getting some space on the queen side, you know. Spassky got no answers for this. He can move his rook into the game, but then we see queen to g6. And if you push this pawn, we're just going to exchange the queens. And this queenside space is just so much benefit for Fischer. And you can also maybe take this knight if he gets too active. And this light squared bishop is going to be an absolute monster with these light squared weaknesses around the king, with the rooks just constantly threatening some sort of checkmate. So we see b3, and then rook e7. Now Fischer thinks, okay, monkey see, monkey do. I'm going to double my rooks as well. So queen d3, rook b8. He thinks, no, I could double my rooks, so I'm choosing not to. I'm not going to do that. He says, if you take, now I can take back. I'm not losing a pawn here. So a takes b5. Fischer recaptures with the pawn. Now he has this open a file. And if you look, we've got a 2-on-1 here already. Pass pawns is probably going to happen here, just because of expansion on the queen side, you know. It's opening up the board. You can see the idea of Fischer's plan. These pawns are now very, very strong. So we see b4. Fischer just goes c4. So now the rook's done its job on the queen side. He's going to rotate to the king's side now, doubling his own rooks, protect himself against the attack of this e-pawn. Then we see rook e3. Bit of a strange move here by Spassky. He's almost sort of trying to pass the move back to Fischer. Maybe he's opening up lines for his queen to go here. He'll try and poke at these pawns if the knight takes. It's a bit harder to see, to be honest. So then we see h5 by Fischer. Now he begins this attack. It's brutal. These pawns, again, they've committed themselves, so they can't move out the way. Fischer decides to attack the concrete structure. So we see rook 3 to e2. Spassky again just goes back. It's a bit strange. It seems like he doesn't have much play here. I mean, look at the space Fischer has. He's getting absolutely squished. The world champion getting outplayed by the American in a fashion that had never been seen before up to this point. We have king h7 by Fischer. A bit of a weird move. Goes back, and they repeat. Spassky thinks, well, the American wants a draw after all. No. Bishop takes c3, snaps, capturing the knight, and the position is exploding. We see rook takes e4, rook takes e4, rook takes e4, rook takes e4, queen takes e4, and then bishop to h6, threatening checkmate in 1. Fischer, of course, did not blunder this. Queen g6, defending the square. And now you can see these pawns are just absolute monsters. And the light square bishop is so much better than dark square bishop. You know, with all these pawns on light squares, the light square bishop isn't really hindered. It can easily get its way out to a square like e4. But this dark square bishop has nothing to attack apart from the king. And the queen just defends this so easily. So we see bishop c1. Spassky wants to keep his options open. Now he has double the scope of his bishop. But then we see queen b1. Pins that to the king. King f1. Bishop f5, see the bishop is now finally getting into the game. And then we see king to e2. It's the endgame now. King activity is king. But with these queens on the board, the king is just quite a vulnerable piece, you know. Queen e4 check, and instantly it's getting checked. Queen c2 check, has to move the queen again. Queen b3. Now these pawns are a problem. You think, how are you going to defend these pawns? Your bishop is just going to have to be slaving away, stuck till the end of eternity. You see queen to d4. Spassky just has no other option, but now black's advantage is just insurmountable. We see bishop to d3 check. King e1. Queen takes b4 check. He's captured the pawn with check. It's with Richard White, and don't want to see this. He now has 2 passed pawns on the queen side. Let's face it, these are not going to be stopped. We have king d1, queen b3 check, king e1. After b4, queen e3. Fischer just plays queen c3 check, queen e2. And Spassky just resigned the game here. He thinks, there's just nothing I can do. He's got no play here. All these he can just trade. These pawns are completely unstoppable. Spassky has no play. He's forced to resign. Completely outplayed by the American Bobby Fischer in this match. It almost started to spell the end. You know, Fischer just showed his true prowess, his true playing strength, just rolling a world champion in, as I said before, a way that had never been seen before. Like, this is why people say Bobby Fischer is the best player of all time, because he would just destroy people. So if you enjoyed that video, I think YouTube's going to put one here that it thinks you're going to enjoy, so maybe give that one a watch too. And I hope to see you guys in the next one.